Hi, I'm Ken Good from Cadimage UK, and in this ArchiCAD tips and tricks webinar, we're going to be looking at my personal top 10 ArchiCAD productivity tips. You'll be pleased to hear there's no PowerPoint, everything is done within ArchiCAD, and I'm going to count down from 10 down to number 1 surprisingly, with a little bit of an extra one thrown in just for the sake of it. So my number 10 tip is to use reusable search criteria within Find and Select. If I take a look at this fantastic building I've put together here, you'll see there's a range of windows at different sizes, a whole load of different chairs are placed within the building, and I want to use Find and Select to be able to pick up various components here. So Find and Select's available through the Edit menu, Edit, Find and Select, or you can use Control F or Command F if you're on a Mac to access the same dialog. What you'll see here is at the top of the screen I actually have a custom option, but there's some built-in criteria to search for all types that'll just select everything on this particular story. I don't want to do that. There are also options to select 2D, 3D elements, etc. But there's also my criteria set. So I've been here previously and I've set things up where I can say, find me all of the windows that are 600 wide, and it goes and does so. So it's an exact match in this case. I've also got one that says find me all the windows that are greater than 1 meter wide. So again, hit the add button and off it goes and it picks these up. You'll see from the numbers here though, there will be others elsewhere on screen, and if I do a right click, zoom to selection, I can just check it's selecting what I want it to pick up. So definitely not in this case. So I'll deselect that. We can also use a marquee to limit the search that's going on. But what I want to do is just maybe, let's say, grab all of the armchairs, but maybe now take the armchair 01s and deselect those, so I'm left with just the ones that are on screen here where I'd expect them to be, and then do whatever I have to do with them. So the selection, the add and remove is simple enough, but what's key to this is using this little button to be able to store a criteria. So this one's already stored, so it goes into management mode, so we can rename or we can delete or we can import and export to and from other projects. So the key to this really is just keeping an eye on this little button at the top of the screen where you can use the flyout and then you can save your find and select criteria. Number 9 is just a little quickie one, but when you're doing certain types of work, if I want to work on maybe the cladding that I've used as a coverings tool, so the cladding I've used for this particular building, if I want to make a change to this wall, I have to keep track of what's going on with the two that I can't see as well as the two that I can see, and obviously it's just a rectangular building, so I would do lots of spinning around, but it'd be better if I could do all 4 walls at once. The plan doesn't work in this case because the detail's visible only really in section or elevation, so what I have to do is go to one of these elevations, and you can see already I've got a little sort of pink version. There's a trace reference going on underneath this particular elevation. If I zoom out slightly, you can see what I've actually done is, I suppose, kind of cheat, because what I'm doing is, in terms of reference, I'm actually using a layout sheet. So if I go to my layout book, it has only one layout in here, but you can see that this layout actually contains the various different elevations, the plan, and also the 3D. So if I go to the east elevation, this shouldn't have any reference. Nope, nice and blank. So what I can do is position that, and then all I do is go to my layout book, right click on it, and say show this as the trace reference. Now the pink's useful for comparison, but to see more of the detail, what I'll do is pull up the trace and reference palette, and what I'll do is I'll change the reference to be original colour, but then what I do is, I've already kind of done it here, I tend to dull the colours down a little bit so it's a more ghosted effect, so that I'm not, so it's much easier to see what I'm actually working on. So all you do is put together a layout sheet and put the various different views onto it and then use that as your reference. So number 8, this is all about consolidation. So I have here a whole bunch of lines that have been drawn. They overlap, they sit on top of each other, there's duplicates, there's all sorts of things going on with it. So if I select these, I want to be able to consolidate it to reduce the number that's there and just make life a little bit easier. So all I do is just say edit, reshape, and I want to do a line work consolidation. And then there's various bits of the dialogue we go through and carefully read, or just stab the next button as many times as you like. But if I say next, I can choose to merge on to particular layers, pens and categories. We can choose what to do with connecting lines, with overlapping lines, with solid lines, and overlapping lines before we actually do the final consolidation. But when I do the consolidation, it tells me it's deleted duplicates. There's a lot going on here of lines covered by other solid lines. We can choose what we're actually doing here to tidy things up. So that leaves me now with, if I select again, 19 elements. Previously, if I do an undo actually, there were 43 elements. So there's quite a reduction there by running the consolidation. If you want to take it further, you can then unify. So here I have more 2D lines, so 19 elements. So if I reshape and this time do a unify, then what that does is combine these into now just 6 elements. So it's 5 letters, the middle bar of the E remains as just one element because it can't connect at a midpoint of another polyline. Consolidation also works with fills, so here I have a pretty little pattern, but if I actually select it, it's made up of 25 elements. So if I do reshape, fill consolidation, slightly less complicated dialog box, but we can choose what to do here. Okay, that, and that now leaves me with 3 elements. A couple of little notes with that though to be cautious of. If I have this particular shape and I want to retain the boundary lines, if I was to run a consolidation on here, we can choose what to do with the boundaries of them. If they have an outline, I can choose to ignore them, but in this case it is going to ignore the outline rather than preserve it. So when I hit OK, what it does is ignores the outline and leaves me with one physical outline of the one remaining shape. So obviously if I wanted to preserve those individual overlapping lines, I would have to keep them as separates. On another little note, what I have here is just a little detail through a wall section. I'm just adding in mortar joints at 75mm. If I select everything, we have 30 elements. But if I run a fill consolidation on this shape, then what I actually end up with is 49 elements. So I've got an extra 19 elements. And what's happening there is this fill pattern actually breaks the original brickwork underneath. So it breaks these down into individual brick pieces. And similarly with the block work. So we have to be a little bit careful of that in these sort of circumstances. But otherwise it can tidy up and it can actually reduce file sizes. Number 7 is just about dimensioning editing. There is a pet palette to take us through the process. Personally, I find the good old-fashioned keys a lot easier to manage. It's very, very simple. If I pick on a dimension chain and actually click, there is a pet palette, gives me different options. But in reality, if I've got a dimension chain selected, if I hold down Control on a PC or Command on a Mac, and then just find a tick mark and click, then what actually happens is we just add the points very, very quickly and very easily to anywhere that I actually click. Fortunately, you can also undo to take these silly ones back out. Removing points is just as easy. I'm on the arrow tool, so if I highlight the dimension chain, you'll see the whole thing selects, but if I move the mouse to just one of these points, you'll see just that one node selects. So I can just select it, press the delete key. Delete that one and that one. I can also combine chains, so all I do is select a dimension chain, same key, Control or Command, click, and off it goes and connects them up. Whatever one is selected first is the one that remains in position. and then any ones that you combine with connect to that original chain. They have to be exactly parallel or it doesn't work. So make sure in this case we combine with the upper one so the dimension doesn't disappear into the wall. We can also drag them around. We just pick up and just start to drag. So drag and drop, and that allows us to reposition wherever we need them to be. So basically all I'm doing there is using Control or Command to add and combine dimension chains. Number 6, every pixel counts. This is just simply, I want to make use of the screen as much as possible. I'm running at a reduced resolution for the webinar, so I've actually lost a good few hundred pixels. If I go back to 2D and grab something like the wall tool, you can see across the bottom of the info box there's this grey bar. It's a slider that allows you to go through the settings. But the reality is, I don't think I've ever used that in all the years that I've been using ArchiCAD like this. So what you actually do is put the mouse inside the info box, don't click, just rest it in there, and then you just scroll the mouse wheel and that goes up and down through it for you. So the reality is I can take that bar and just slide the info box, give myself a few more pixels. So that's saved a few, but I can also save a few over here. The toolbox here, although there's more tools been introduced since version 10 when they introduced this new format, things like the arrow tool, the wall tool, the doors and the windows, these are unchanged, and I should think anybody that's used ArchiCAD for any length of time will be fairly familiar with the icons. You don't need labels. So what you can do is just grab and then just shrink that straight back out of the way so you have a little bit more extra space. Orbiting in 3D, this is something that personally I hate the orbit command. I love the functionality of it, but to actually use the orbit command I just find pretty slow and tedious. So I've got this wonderful building already in place. It's got all sorts of odd angles, even more so when you look at it in 3D. But my hate about the orbit command is the fact that you have to go to orbit and then click it around and move it around, and now I want to select the car, so I try and click, but no, I have to remember to come out of orbit and then I can select the car. The same is true if I use O to activate the command. Spin it around, press O again to come back out, then I can select. So what I'd rather do is just use the mouse, so I have here pan, so all I'm doing there is holding down the mouse wheel. On the Apple mouse you have to check the settings to give you that same middle button functionality of a conventional mouse, but I've got just a normal 3-button mouse here, so it's just a wheel. So holding down the wheel gives pan, but if I hold down shift and the wheel, then that gives me orbit, and I can nice and easily let go of shift, I can select multiples, shift, pan around a little bit further again, and I can pick up these skylights, do whatever I have to do with them, and I can just use shift and the wheel button to orbit as much as I like, and I just find it far quicker and far easier than trying to use the actual command to do the work. Number 4, direction dependent selection is, as it says, you get a selection dependent on the direction. So mine is already actually activated, and what it means is if I draw, and I'll try and repeat this, I'm going to draw one rectangular selection window from there to there. When I click the mouse, only one element selects. So if I repeat that, so click from there to approximately there, when I click again, this time I get 7 elements selected. And what's actually happening, if I put the mouse in the middle of the screen, when I go from left to right, you'll see I'm getting a center line selection window. If I go from right to left, I get a dotted line. And this is a little bit like AutoCAD, to use a term. AutoCAD has the same sort of functionality of a window selection method and a crossing window. So this is a window selection method, only elements fully inside are selected, whereas if I go for the crossing window, then anything that touches, even if it only touches by a couple of millimeters, that is automatically selected because it's part of that selection window. And the way we activate it is in the info box. We have three options under the very first option. I'm on the arrow tool, I should point out. The very first option is to set ArchiCAD as it comes out the box. So this is by default a crossing window, whether we go right to left or left to right. We then have a window selection method permanently, which means it only selects everything fully inside. Or we go for direction dependent, which allows you to choose whatever one's appropriate. Where it really comes into its own is in something like this. If I want to select just the mortar, if I do a kind of biggish rectangle like that, I've picked up the Latin labels, I've picked up the dimensions, I've picked up the brick, the insulation, and the mortar, and everything on this side. But if I do that again, this time, with a little bit more control, I'm able to pick up only the elements that I want. So I've got the mortar, let's just change it to a different colour for the sake of it, and we can work quite happily like that. Keyboard shortcuts are a crucial one. There are hundreds of keyboard shortcuts in ArchiCAD, but there's some of them that really are more important than others. So what we do is we can actually pull up a list of all the keyboard shortcuts. So all we do is go to Options, Work Environment, and Keyboard Shortcuts. There's a big wide button across the bottom of the screen here, Show Shortcut List in Browser. And what that does is generate an HTML list of every single shortcut that's currently active in ArchiCAD. So there's a few of these that obviously you can go and memorise, and by tomorrow you'll have them sorted, I'm sure. These ones are all the ones that are there's things like gravity, there's X coordinate, that's pretty easy, but measure, I'm going to come on to that. Various bits and pieces, but really the crucial ones are these ones at the very bottom, the non-customizable ones. So things like what the escape key does, what the backspace key does, and it's the difference between backspace and delete, because that's a fairly crucial one. But also things like pick up and inject, so Alt and Control Alt. Spacebar has a whole load of different options, so it's worth taking a look at these shortcuts and getting familiar with them. As I say, it is just a regular HTML thing, so we could grab a whole batch of them from there down to there, and what I could then do is just copy paste that into a Word document or Notepad or whatever sort of text editor, so that you can then just edit it to what you want it to be and print it out if you want to stick it on your screen. So come back into ArchiCAD. So I already gave a little hint there, because number 2 is the measure tool, because this is something that I find that people don't use enough. I've seen measuring done in various different ways over the years, from moving the origin, so shift the origin to there. I would then need to lose some of the pixels I've just gained to turn on a couple of palettes across the bottom of the screen to be able to put the mouse on a point and read the coordinates. But what I want to do is, well, not that. The other way I've seen this done, people checking dimensions, is they maybe draw a line. So from there to there is 750, and from there to there is 750 as well. And if you forget to delete these lines, what you end up with is a document that's output with extra 2D lines that are just not meant to be there. So that can be a bit dangerous. So I've seen other people, rather than do that, they'll maybe draw a circle, or start to draw a circle, hit escape, draw one from there to there, check that dimension. But there is a risk with this that you forget to delete elements, which is never going to be a good thing. So the proper way to do it is to use the measure tool. So it's actually up here as a little ruler, and all you do is click on one point, rest the mouse on another, and we get to read the distance, the angle, and the X and Y coordinate. But it actually goes a little bit further than that. So if I go across to this corner and actually click, we can then carry on and we can work our way around. So it's giving me the length of each segment. If I get back to the beginning and just rest it there, it's telling me the distance, the length of each segment, the angle, the X and the Y, but more crucially, I'm also able to get the cumulative distance, so the perimeter of the shape, as well as the area. So it's quite a useful thing. And quick way to come in and out of it is just press the M key, so M for measure. This also works in 3D, so M, and we can say, right, what's the length of this edge? So from there across to there is 10 meters. And if we take it around, we can use shift and pan, 8 meters to there, and it should hopefully be 10 to there, and then back to where I started. So the concrete area in total is 36 square meters. One other little extra bit with measure, which you might not be aware of, but if I start to draw an element, and I want this wall to be exactly the same length as that ridge line there, don't know why, but let's do it. Set the wall off in the direction I want it to go, so 0 degrees, press M, and then I can measure any element. So that's 2899, and if I press the enter key, what it actually does is transfer the 2899 into the length field of the wall that I happen to be drawing. So I can do that, I can press enter, and I've drawn a wall that's now the same length as the ridge on the roof for whatever reason. So that might be something you use, might not, but certainly the measure tool is something you should be using just to speed up the checking process. This little one here, as I've said, is not strictly a productivity tip. It's more of a dishonourable mention because it's not going to make you more productive, but if I just show you anyway, I have a chair that I placed. It's got to be armchair 01, and if I stretch it, we can have a big chair, we could have a wide chair, we could have a narrow and deep chair, but as soon as we take it across 2 meters in any one of its dimensions, it converts into, I would call it noughts and crosses rather than tic-tac-toe, but obviously that's the Hungarian name for it. This is completely unproductive. It's kind of put in here as a little Easter egg just to show what GDL can do and how you can convert objects to display in different ways. So the key to this is once the chair's over 2 meters wide or deep, you suddenly get a game of noughts and crosses, and then you can play as cross, noughts, and it looks like I can't even beat myself at noughts and crosses. Fantastic. Anyway, nobody's going to win that game, so we'll move on. So the final bit to look at is just the coordinate calculator, and this really is something I use all the time in ArchiCAD, and without it, it's just really quite tricky to work, I suppose, because I would find myself having to draw elements and then move them into place, or copy elements, or all sorts of stuff that really, it just slows things down. So the coordinate calculator is very, very basic. If I start to draw something, I'll give it a 2 meter length, that finishes there. I then want to leave exactly 1 meter before I draw the next element, and then draw another piece of wall. So what I do is, rather than start to draw, I just put the mouse on a point and rest it there. Press X or Y, depending if I'm moving horizontally or vertically. So if I press X, and then type in the distance I want to move, so 1 meter, and then the way the coordinate part works is, if I hit plus, it's going to move to the right, if I hit minus, it's going to move to the left. So I hit plus, I want to draw from there, so I press enter, and then I just move the mouse, type in a new size, press enter, and it's done. Exactly the same thing's true with the window tool. So let's go for a corner point. We stick the mouse on this bottom corner of this wall, and I say I want this to be 2250, plus to move to the right, press enter, and then open it. And I can do the same from the other side. X, 2250 minus, should have actually gone for this corner here, but it leaves me the guidelines, so I can then place this and know that it's exactly, if I go and check, 250 from corner to corner. As well as drawing, we can move things around. So if I take this wall, Control D to drag, I can rest it on this corner, so it's given a distance. If I press X, it actually shows the real XY coordinate of that point from the origin in the project. The number's not important. It is 4460, so if I do X 1000 plus, you see it adds 1000, so it's now 5660. And Y is 1442, so let's go down to Y and we'll say 1000 plus, and you'll see it now changes to minus 422 rather than 1422. So we can move it around, we can use combinations of X's and Y's and whatever we have to do to calculate and find our new position wherever that happens to be on screen. So you can use combinations of X and Y. It works with drag, it works when you're drawing elements. The crucial thing when you're drawing elements is to just rest the mouse on a point rather than click to begin with. So I rest it there and then say go X2250 plus. I could then maybe say Y is 500 minus, and then might decide actually I want to add another 1000 to X. So we just keep adding, and when I'm finished adding all these points up, press the enter key, and now it will draw the new element for me, wherever that happens to be. So that's the final bit of my top 10. I'll just say a quick thank you for attending the session, and if you have any questions or follow up, then feel free to get in touch and we'll see what we can do to help. Thanks again for your time.